This is California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined today by Bob Stockton. He will be a director with the Western Municipal Water District. We know that you will be a director because why?
I ended up effectively running unopposed by the time of the filing deadline.
And what's interesting about that is the fact that you are running unopposed and the board or the district chose not to put your name on the ballot anyway saved the district what?
Well, it was the registrar.
Perfect.
And so because it was unopposed, I'm not going to actually be on the ballot.
Right.
So there's no election cost to go along with that, and that's going to save Western Municipal Water District, from what I hear, about $200,000.
Not bad. No complaints there.
Well, it's kind of nice going in as a director and
then
saving the district before I even get seated.
I was recently in Redding, California, and I went to visit Shasta Dam, which was really beautiful, but simultaneously a little creepy, because I looked out to the dam and I saw these lunar-looking islands almost, and I turned to my guide and I said, "Those aren't supposed to be there, is that right?" And she said, no, those are not supposed to be there. The water line was well below where it should have been, and visibly even to the layperson. You've worked in water professionally. What did I see, and what's the ramifications of what I saw?
Well, what you saw was almost historic low levels of lakes up in Northern California. We're in the midst of an 8-year drought. The only year not being a drought year, that 2011. So 8 straight years effectively of drought. In 2014, our snowpack is down to 33% of normal, historically low levels. The rainfall runoff out of Northern California, it's the 4th lowest in the last 100 years. So that's what you're seeing when you're
I have heard, and I'm sure you have as well, that this drought is historic. I've read one study which said it's the worst drought in 500 years, another one the worst drought in 120 years. I understand that there are even some scientists that are saying this drought is so severe that we need to consider population patterns and whether we should be encouraging in-migration and, by definition, encouraging out-migration. I mean, this is dramatic.
Yeah, in the state of California right now, 85% of the state is in what's either called extreme or exceptional drought, which are the two worst levels. I mean, if you look at graphics, and dark red being exceptional drought, most of the state is covered by that. So we are in a historic situation.
You know, I love throwing out statistics, even though they may cause people's eyes to glass over, but this one I read, which was stunning. So over the last few years, in terms of groundwater, the western United States has lost 63 trillion gallons of groundwater. And what does that mean? If we covered the western U.S. with 4 inches of water, that's how much water we've lost in terms of groundwater. This is, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but it's apocalyptic.
It's significant. You know, going back to what you were talking about in terms of should we be analyzing population growth, I'd like to talk a little bit about the difference between what's happened in Southern California versus Northern California.
And it's fascinating. I know where you're going.
Well, I mean, population is almost doubled since the state project was completed, yet we're using less water.
You look at, for example, Los Angeles. I believe it's Los Angeles City. The city is using the same amount of water that it did in I think it's 90? 99. Right. And yet the population has spiked by a million.
It grew 5 million.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So it's the county. So that's a county stat.
That's correct.
So we're doing something right. And ironically, and I'm sure you know this, during this drought, who has suffered more? You'd think Southern California, we have no water. It's Northern California that's struggling. Yeah. Is it because we've been water-wise conserved? What's going on here?
It's a combination of factors. The first being water use efficiency has been at the forefront. Conservation has played a really big role in that. But the other is back in the 90s, we had a severe drought in the early 90s. And what came out of that was a different paradigm in terms of water use. And Metropolitan Water District embarked on a major...
That's a huge district, a huge regional district.
Yeah, 5,200 square miles, 19 million customers. But they started building reservoirs, surface water storage. And since the mid-90s, they've increased storage within their service area.
Which is south.
which is Southern California, 13 times.
Right.
And that's really what has allowed Southern California to really weather this drought much better than Northern California.
And I want to talk about storage. When I was at Shasta Dam, I looked at the dam and I had heard rumblings, well, what about increasing the size of the dam, the height of the dam? And while that's under consideration, that's a federal dam. And so that has its own set of challenges. But then there's a dam down the road, or a potential dam, help me out here, Oroville, Lake Oroville.
Oroville,
yeah,
correct.
yeah. So tell us about that, and I believe that's a more pressing project.
Yeah, well, absolutely, because Lake Oroville is really the primary storage reservoir for the whole state water project. And it's at historic low levels right now. There's photographs that are just amazing when you look at where it is at normal levels and where it is now. You talked about the islands. I mean, there's valleys that are exposed in Oroville, but that being the primary reservoir on the state project, it's absolutely critical that water supply be protected.
And so are there discussions, I believe there are, to increase the size of that dam, including and specifically as a result of the water bond, which will be on the ballot in November? And if polls are accurate, looks like we'll pass?
Yeah, the polls are actually polling pretty well.
Right.
It looks like about a 2-to-1 margin right now.
Right. So, okay, so for argument's sake, bond passes. How quickly does Oroville increase in capacity?
Well, I'm not sure that Oroville will be one of the...
Or hypothetically, whatever it is.
But the major surface water storage that will probably be constructed out of the bond will be in Northern California.
Okay.
I think Southern California will have more of a focus on groundwater storage, but up in the north, you know, in the bond package, there's about $2.7 billion.
That's true.
For surface water storage and groundwater, and that's has to be leveraged at a ratio of at least 2-to-1 in matching funds.
But when? I mean, and the reason I push you is the drought's today. One could argue it is wonderful that the voters of California seem to be looking towards the future, but we have a problem right now, sir. You know that.
Absolutely.
So when? What? How? Help.
I wish I could give you a really good answer.
That's okay.
Because as an engineer,
yeah,
we can engineer, we can figure out what to do, we can figure out how much money has to be spent. What'll be the key issue is environmentally. How long is it going to take to clear the CEQA process to get these
Well, Governor Brown says he wants to streamline CEQA, so...
This would be the perfect opportunity to put that to test.
And as you know, we had groundwater legislation passed. We finally, and I'm not taking a position, but we were the only state that didn't regulate groundwater on the western side of the Rockies, I believe. But I was reading that with all the groundwater regulation that we're looking toward, it's not a huge amount, I understand, but be that as it may, it will be until 2040 when we finally get that situation resolved.
Well, it'll happen in steps. So it'll occur over time, and it's not that we have to wait till 2040.
Right.
There'll be significant improvement.
I understand.
Over time, probably starting right now in Southern California, they're doing some significant projects in the groundwater basins to actually use desalination.
Sure. Isn't that expensive, desal?
It is. It is. But it's a resource that, when you look at the whole portfolio, it's an important component of it.
So what do you hope to do when you join the board, join the water district?
Well, I want to make sure that we have a clean, reliable water supply, and at rates that the ratepayers can afford.
How's the basin here in the Inland Empire? Is it contaminated? Do we have those issues in the Inland Empire?
We do have some issues. Perchlorate, especially up in the Rialto Basin. Bunker Hill has some issues, but the good news is that there was court cases in the past where that cleanup is actually had to be paid by the polluters.
I understand. Okay, his name is Bob Stockton. He will be a director with the Western Municipal Water District in the Inland Empire of California. My name is Brad Pomerance. It's California Edition.